Hey everybody, this is Final Flame Productions back with another Terminator video. I haven't done a Terminator video in a while, but today I wanted to go back and give a pretty controversial, but I think maybe not so controversial. I'll let you in the comment section decide. I believe that Terminator Dark Fate is the worst Terminator movie of all the 6 movies. So yeah, I think it's worse than Terminator Genisys. Terminator Genisys, arguably one of the most hated of all the Terminator movies before Dark Fate was released. But on watching the movies again, I think that while Genisys is a complete mess, and I'll go through why I think Genisys is such a problematic movie, I think it's more rewatchable. I think it's more entertaining. While Terminator Genisys makes some really idiotic plot points, it's less disrespectful to the Terminator franchise than Dark Fate is. In terms of Terminator Genisys, a quick run through of what I think about it. Generally, I was excited for Terminator Genisys before it was released. The more I've seen of it, I still found things to be interested by. In terms of bad things, the John Connor being turned a bad guy was not a good idea. Maybe not a bad idea had they changed it and got it back to the way it should have been, where he was a good guy, but of course they killed John Connor at the end. But no, I thought that was a terrible idea. The movie itself has a lot of things to like in it. Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance in Terminator Genisys is his strongest point. I think it's possibly one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best performances. He's given quite a lot to do in the movie. He's in the movie a lot, compared to Dark Fate, where he had very, very little to do and only arrived in the last half hour of the movie. But Arnold is terrific in the movie. He has a lot of depth to his Terminator character. This time around, we get to see how a Terminator would grow and evolve the longer he is around human beings. We get the Arnie versus Arnie fight at the start of the movie, which is really terrifically done, and just a kind of a geek moment to see two Arnold Schwarzeneggers fighting each other. We have that brilliant recreation of the arrival scenes from Terminator 1. We have a pretty solid hospital fight scene in Terminator Genisys. The fight between John Connor and Arnold is a really kind of, it feels more like a Terminator fight scene compared to Dark Fate, which had a lot of very kind of over-the-top, wire-based kind of kung fu type fight scenes that didn't really fit the Terminator world at all. We had a pretty good bus chase, and at the end it does veer too much into the CGI fight scenes. We have that pretty terrible helicopter chase in Genisys, which I think is a really poor scene. It's nearly all CGI. Pretty much everything is computer generated, and it just looks fake. When you compare that to Terminator 2, which had a really good helicopter chase, and then the plot in itself, which is something that people who watch Terminator Genisys just think is insane. The turning John Connor bad, the going back in time, it's all over the place. But at least the plot in Terminator Genisys is different. If I look more now at Terminator Dark Fate's plot is really, it says it's trying to continue on from T2, but it's really just copying things from loads of different Terminator movies. I mean, the acting is better. If you look at the Terminator Genisys, the acting is really, really bad in Terminator Genisys. Emilia Clarke and Jai Courtney are really miscast in Terminator Genisys. And the acting is better in Dark Fate. You have people like Mackenzie Davis, Linda Hamilton, much better actors than Jai Courtney and Emilia Clarke. However, you do also have Natalia Reyes, who is in Terminator Dark Fate, but she is really miscast, and she's possibly worse than Emilia Clarke. I think Emilia Clarke is a good actor, but she just seemed completely out of her depth, trying to recreate or do any sort of, to be compared in any way to Linda Hamilton was always going to be a tough thing to follow. Again, Dark Fate, it had better acting generally than Genisys, and the CGI for the first half of the movie in Dark Fate seemed lot more limited, a lot more grounded, like Terminator should be. If you watch T2 and T1, those movies are extremely stunt based and practically done, and CGI is used very sparingly. Dark Fate holds that up for the first part of the movie. That first car chase is pretty good. The movie then starts to veer into the really loopy, crazy land like Genisys does. We have that awful airplane free fall scene. We have that dam scene that looks completely green screened. We have that awful ending fight scene with Mackenzie Davis, the Rev 9, and Arnie, which is just all green screeny and fake looking. And Genisys has a similar ending as well. Tim Miller and James Cameron talked about how much they wanted to improve and fix the things from Genisys, but if you look at the ending of both Genisys and Dark Fate, they're pretty much the exact same. They look like they're even filmed in the same places, which is quite bizarre. I mean, the biggest thing of Dark Fate that makes it probably the most loathsome of the worst of all the Terminator movies is how they get rid of John Connor. Now, in fairness, Genisys also makes a complete pig's ear of John Connor's role, but at least in Genisys they give John Connor a big role, and at least we see for the first 20 minutes or so the proper John Connor and who he really is and who he would become to be and how important he was. But then they turn him into a bad guy, and it's terrible. But in Dark Fate they just completely get rid of him simply because Tim Miller and James Cameron didn't want him in the movie and thought he'd be distracting to the other cast members, the new cast members of Dark Fate. So that opening scene where they kill John Connor is simply terrible. It's one of them. It's one of those scenes that completely kills any enthusiasm and joy for the movie, and you just simply can't recover after that. And they also they removed Kyle Reese as well. I mean, he's not mentioned in the movie, so you could sort of say, oh well, he still has a part to play. But Tim Miller, in his infinite wisdom in an interview with Collider, I think, says that Kyle Reese doesn't exist anymore because of an amazing timeline supposedly that Tim Miller has created. So that's John Connor and Kyle Reese, two really important male characters in the franchise, completely sidelined. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is probably the biggest, the most important character in the Terminator franchise, is also sidelined. He has only a small role, and he only appears in the last half hour of the movie, and is an interesting character and lifts the movie quality wise, but he's just not in it enough for him to improve it. Whereas if you took Arnold out of Genisys would be a much less entertaining and a far worse movie. Had you put more Arnie in Dark Fate, I think it would have improved it. All these decisions are just undermine the first two movies. Dark Fate's action, while the start of the movie it's a lot more crunchy and a little bit more practically and stunt based, it is all very forgettable. At least in Genisys had the Arnie versus Arnie fight. It had the recreation of T1 where you see Kyle Reese being chased and all those things, and it puts a nice spin on it. It's really quite cool and well made. You have the hospital fight and the bridge bus chase, which is actually kind of cool as well. But Terminator Dark Fate's action scenes, except for maybe the part in the detention center where the Rev 9 kills all the guards, that's a pretty cool thing. The R rating was kind of slapped on for a few curse words and a few kind of CGI blood. The R rating was kind of a laughable kind of way to save face, because they admitted that they did start the movie as a PG-13 and then they tried to make it R-rated, and it was completely unnecessary and not really worthy of the R rating. And you have just characters like Mackenzie Davis, who's actually a good actor and it seems like a cool role. She's pretty interesting character. Grace, but she's completely underutilized, underwritten. Her character's sort of one note the whole way through, and she is a human character. She's kind of half human, half Terminator, and we never really get to know much about her. And Natalia Reyes, as I said, as Danny Ramos, is just very poorly cast, and her performance isn't very good at all. And essentially, Dark Fate just redoes a lot of T2 plot points, but they get rid of John Connor because they didn't want to have the John Connor character, because they apparently wanted to recast it as female character as John Connor. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just idiotic. So overall, the whole thing from start to finish was a little off. The Hollywood Reporter interview was a pretty nice way to introduce things. Miller and Cameron promised a lot and didn't deliver on most of what they said they would do in terms of getting the franchise back to what the fans wanted. They seemingly just did what they thought, with very little appreciation of what the fans would want. What do you think about the whole Terminator Dark Fate saga? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know.